Hello, this is Harry Forbes from ARC Advisory Group. I'm pleased to welcome you to our Thursday session entitled Open Process Automation, Where Will End Users Find Value? The session will consist of 4 recorded presentations by members of the Open Process Automation Forum, both suppliers and end users. And that will be followed by about a 45-minute question and answer session where you can ask questions directly of panelists who are all members of the Open Process Automation Forum, both end users and suppliers. Please enter your questions on the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will use these questions for the panel. And please enter them at any time. They will be queued up for the panel. Thank you very much. And Dave, now you can begin the presentations.
Hello, I'm Dave Emerson with Ikogawa, and I'm going to talk to you about the Open Process Automation Forum gaining momentum. I'm actually the first of many speakers and panelists to be able to talk to you today, and we're all glad to be able to convey the value we see in the Open Process Automation Forum. I'll start off talking about the upcoming release version 2.1, and Jaakko Opner from Shell will talk about some adoption scenarios that he sees. And then we'll have end user value statements from Bruce Ainsworth with Georgia Pacific and Stephen Smith with Eastman Chemical. Then we'll wrap up with panel discussions and question and answers. The Open Process Automation Forum, OPAF, produces the OPAF standard. This was first released as version 1 in 2019 and focused on interoperability using OPC UA. Version 2 was released a year ago in 2020. And this focused on configuration portability, or the ability to move control strategies between different control systems. Version 2.1 is a continuation of the version 2 release in that it provides configuration portability and control functionality. I'll be discussing most of this today in this presentation. Version 3 is being worked on right now as far as scope and content. We expect it to address application portability and orchestration. The OPAF's technical architecture is a very well-known figure, and I won't go through this all today. What I'll be focusing is down here in the lower left in background in the blue box, which really is where the OPAF's version 2.1 focus is. This chart is showing you the OPAF's releases to date. What we see here is in version 1 was released in 2019. There were 5 parts to this. In 2020, version 2 was released, and then we see many more parts were added, and plus the existing parts were updated. Version 2.1 will be coming out throughout first quarter, the third quarter 2021. First quarter in review process right now, and probably within weeks will be released. We have several updated sections and 2 new updated sections. Later in second, third quarter, we'll have a new section on IEC 61499, plus the profile section will be updated. Now up here you see final and preliminary, and I'll explain all this in the next slide, but what to know here is that the preliminary is being put out to help get feedback from industry. Once we have that feedback, and once we've done some internal interoperability testing and some validation internally and within the members, it becomes final. This slide shows you the release cycles of the OPAF standard. It all starts with a technical working group, a combination of experts from many different companies who actually write the standards. They work in a very detailed level to get the interfaces correct and to decide what should be published. They go through an internal review cycle there, but when they are happy with it, it goes into the OPAF, the forum level, and to the open group, where it goes through multiple review cycles, and then it's released as a preliminary release, a preliminary standard. This allows public review, and this is a very important step because we very much want to get feedback, and this will go back to the technical working group as well as the whole forum. But it gives the technical working group a chance to see what there are questions on, what may not be clear, and what there may be some technical errors on. And they will then correct that and make changes as appropriate. And then it goes through the review cycle again. And next time it goes to a final release. And there's still an opportunity to provide feedback. But we always hope that it's during the preliminary release cycle that we get the most feedback and get companies looking at it and individuals looking at it from each company. And that will help build a better standard. We like to say that OPAS is a standard of standards. OPAS is not trying to recreate things that are already there. There's a great number of standards and a great amount of intellectual property in these standards that have been in use by many different companies. And this is just a chart of showing from the different parts some of the different standards that are being used, whether ISA 95 or IEC 62264, ISA 99 or IEC 62443, and so on, with OPCUA, and Redfish is actually an IT standard from DMTF, which is being adopted with the OPAS standards in Part 5 for system management. And then you can see further down when we look at Part 6, information exchange models, which is closer to the configuration of a control system and the process control functions. We're again using OPCUA, automation ML, which has been pioneered in Europe, ISA 18.2, or which is also known as IEC 62682 for alarming, and IEC 1131 and IEC 61499. The Part 6 of OPAS is really the heart of the control functionality, and it's probably been the most work in version 2.1, and maybe the most work up to 2.1 of any of the releases to date. The foundational level is in 6.1, and this is exchange models. Primarily, it deals a lot with automation markup language, AML, for import-export. And this is what makes importing and exporting, transferring the configuration data from one system to another system possible, even between different vendor systems, because it gives you a supplier-neutral way to transfer that data. 6.1 identifies AML and the structures to use and the OPAS rules for using it. Part 6.2 is an OPCUA information model, which provides common definitions of data types and structures and for all the layers above it. And the layers above it, there's 4 of them in version 2.1. I can imagine later there'll be many more. 6.4 deals with function blocks. And I'll talk about each one of these later, so I won't go into detail now. 6.3 deals with alarms. 6.6 deals with the IEC 61131 standard, and 6.5 deals with IEC 61499. You may notice that these are not in numerical sequence, but as the standard was developed and work started on the standard, the technical working group decided just to assign numbers for organization purposes. There's not any real reason one's before the other. I list them here more because I think it's more logical from an end user control engineer standpoint to look at them. So we'll start with 6.4, or function blocks. And what this is a standard of defining the inputs and outputs of function blocks. Now, in our industry, as any control engineer knows, there's many different function blocks, many different systems, and there are even different standards. And they're all a little bit different, but they basically do the same thing. So what we're trying to provide is a set of reference functionality here. And you can see, analog input, PID, analog output, the basics. And inside each of these blocks is a lot of detail. And I know you can't read this, it's not meant to be read. But if you get a copy of the standard when it's published, you'll be able to look at this, you'll be able to see the logic inside here and the behavior, and there's limited behavior that we're standardizing. But this is, for example, if you initiate a cascade or if you change mode, there's some basic functionality in what's going to happen. The actual algorithm of the PID is not what we're getting at. What we're getting at is how to move data between the blocks, and if you have, say, open and closed cascade, you have common behavior. The other thing that 6.4, and actually the 6.2 standard, which is one of those underlying standards, parts of the standard, deals with is called OPAS signal service, which comes from the sensor in an OPAS signal service goes out to the actuator. This is basic functionality that takes data from a sensor and I/O module and gets it into the function block environment. Now, there is going to be sample code for these function blocks, and it's written in IEC 1131-3. This is not meant to be used to control your plant. This is meant as a proof of concept to prove that the technology works. And also, these function blocks can help end users to compare systems. If they wish to adopt them, it will then help them use control strategies or control function blocks from different suppliers and make them work together. We're not issuing this to say all other function blocks should stop. This is just a reference model, and it's a comparative implementation between different systems. And if used, it should be a path for easier interoperability and interchangeability. OPAS 6.3 deals with alarms. And this is the first step of entering the alarms into the OPAS standard. I envision there may be more, but for right now, the alarm scope deals really with inside the process control system and maybe advanced applications. It does not talk about HMI, it does not talk about alarm rationalization, does not talk about master alarm database. Those are all very important things, and they're all part of 18.2 and 682. However, this is really focused on the scope that OPCUA Part 9 Alarms and Conditions covers, and that is how to generate an alarm, the data structures of the alarm, and what data is in that. And this is the first step. So alarm attributes are covered. The exchange of alarm configuration data is covered, and this is something that would support a master alarm database and alarm rationalization, other alarm analysis tools later. And also it works well with the OPCUA alarm model, which is also based upon ISA 18.2 and IEC 62682. So it is very standards-based alarm model. One of the aspects here is that we are separating alarm configuration from the configuration of function blocks. That said, the alarm generation and the configuration can go into function blocks, or it could be separate blocks. We're not saying how they should be implemented. We're just saying this is the interface that alarms are passed from a process control system with. OPAS 6.2 deals with IEC 61131. Now, this is a well-known standard. It's been accepted pretty much worldwide for decades now. And so we're not trying to redefine this, and we're not trying to say how you use this other than in the OPAS environment. When you have OPCUA and the data structures and the way you get data in through the service, signal service, and data out through the signal service, this is what we're talking about, how you use 1131-3 with the OPAS environment. IEC 61499 is a relatively new standard, although it's over 10 years old, I think. And this is going out as part 6.4 later this year. Now, 61499 offers, from a technical standpoint, some very interesting capabilities. It's all event-driven, and it enables distribution of control strategies between different processors. And this is a hugely powerful feature. It's still, as far as being new, there's still a limited adoption in the industry. However, in OPAS, we are putting it as a part, not to say you have to use this, but to say if you do use this, this is how it works in OPAS. Much like the 1131. If you use that, here's how it works in OPAS. The 6.1, I'm jumping back then to the foundation level for information exchange models. As I said before, this uses AML, or the automation markup language, which in itself is an IEC standard, and this enables the movement of engineering data, control strategy data, from one supplier's engineering tool to another. And so each of the parts that I talked about, whether it's alarming, 61131, or 61499, there's a way to export that data into a neutral AML file, standards-based, and then to import it to another one. OPAF will not say what the engineering tools do, what the UI does, or how it works. We will say, though, that if it wants to be certified by OPAF, it will be able to import and export a standardized configuration file. And this is the key to the configuration portability that we've talked about. Security is a very important part of the OPAF standard. It's addressed in Part 2, and it's based upon the ISA IEC 62443 standard. And what it does is defines security level 2, SL2, security for every certified product. And these certified products will probably make up components of a system. And so if you look at this figure here, the green area on the bottom, what we're seeing is that the parts of the standard, and if you know 62443, they go by -33, -41, -42, so on. And these are the parts of the standard which apply to product developers, product suppliers. And these are the companies that will provide DCNs or the ACP, function blocks, applications, system management, whatever it may be. And the key aspect, or the key takeaway for this, is that the OPAF standard will require all certified products to provide a consistent set of capabilities to meet security level 2. Now, system integrators, which build the systems for the asset owners, they are building systems to meet the asset owner's requirements. Asset owners look at risk-based and many other factors maybe to decide what they want for security in a system. System integrators do that. What system integrator now has is a consistent set of tools from all the suppliers, different products. Each one, depending upon what it does, may have slightly different aspects of security requirements, but they all are designed to meet security level 2. Not that every system has to meet SL2, but what it means is that the base capabilities are there, so system integrators can design and build a system that meets the asset owner's requirements up to that. And if an asset owner requires something beyond that, well, it probably will come to be then, if there's demand, that the suppliers will create capabilities that can go beyond SL2. In the update for version 2.1, security has been applied to every interface, and there's a detailed mapping in this version 2.1 part 2 that shows and lists what the aspects are for every interface. So it's a very informative section, very useful section, and I encourage you to download it and read it. In OPAF, we expect that version 2.1 will enable products to come to market. What we see here is that there's enough definition in the information models and in the control functionality that will enable suppliers of confidence to move ahead. Now, to build that level of confidence, some things are being done. And one is called a paper exercise. It's not really on paper, but it's more of a thought experiment to trace data through the system to make sure everyone understands the standards the same way as far as the detail, very detailed work on how data will flow between interfaces. And so this is the first step, and it's done so it can go quick. The next step will be to have interoperability workshops, and this will allow suppliers to come in with whether it's proof of concepts, prototypes, pre-release software, whatever, to come in and test these together. And it will be done initially in a virtual environment because of the pandemic requirements. But this will then, in a confidential way, let suppliers test between themselves to know where they stand, and if there's differences in interpretation of the standard, who knows who's right or wrong, but that can be escalated, and then it can be resolved, and it will help before products go to market. And of course, as I talked about, compliance testing is ramping up. We'll talk about that some, but it's so important to have this independent testing of products as they come to market, and to give the end user the assurance that when it says OPAF certified, that they will operate together. And the other thing that really is helping with demand is that end users are creating test beds. Of course, ExxonMobil's talked about theirs, Saudi Aramco's talked about theirs. Other companies are ramping up test bed activities. Um, and what we see is that this is showing that there's demand and there's interest in the end user community for this type of product. And that's a very helpful thing to bring products along. The certification process has started. Part 4 and Part 5 will be the first parts that go through in the first wave. Part 4 deals with OCF, or the OPAF connectivity framework. Part 5 deals with system management, which is the Redfish technology. Part 4, test lab has been identified. That will be the OPC Foundation certification labs. For Part 5, the test lab will be the readied test lab. I believe they spoke earlier in the week at the forum. Once Wave 1 is in place, Waves 2 and 3 will start, and this will be additional certifications based upon the 2.1 standard. The OPAF certification program is viewed as critical to the success of the program. End users will get assurance that certified products meet OPAF standards. System integrators can count on the certified products working together. And then suppliers will have a target that they have to meet in order to enter the ecosystem and gain acceptance. And then it can use that as a springboard to create innovations and differentiation above that. Moving forward, OPAF version 2.1 will be released as preliminary standard in the next couple of weeks. You'll be able to download it, as with all the OPAF standards, at this website. Please send us feedback. Your feedback will help improve version 2.1. In parallel to the release, work is going on the first wave of the conformance tests. When that's done, wave 2 and 3 will follow. And also, version 3 is being worked on. Scope and requirements are in progress. We expect the major themes to be physical platform, orchestration, and application portability. To participate in this, or just to watch and hear what's going on, please join OPAF. The URL here will give you information on how to do that. In summary, OPAF version 2.1 has 12 parts. Thousands of man-hours of expert knowledge has gone into this. People from 30 plus companies have contributed. It will be released over the next few weeks, with the remainder of the parts coming out in the second and third quarter. Version 2.1 will deliver control functionality, reference function blocks, alarm standardization, and how IEC 61131 and IEC 61499 functionality will operate inside the OPAF environment. Also, security is defined, and this is all based upon ISA IEC 62443, also known as ISA 99, and it provides a common security baseline for all OPAF certified products. The OPAF certification process is under development, and these certified products will provide confidence to end users and system integrators of uniform interfaces and uniform capabilities in all the certified products. I'll be handing over to Jaco Ottmer from Shell, who will talk about adoption scenarios. So thank you very much. And here's Jaco.
Thanks, Dave, for the introduction. So my name is Jacques Ottmer. I work for Shell. In Shell, I'm responsible for the program which relates to OPAF, Open Process Automation. And I'm also working on a number of programs that are more in the realms of existing DCS system replacements, so global programs and how to optimize those. In OPAF, together with Luis Duran, I have the co-chair role of the business working group. And I'm also active as a member of the WIB in the Netherlands. I'm in the board of executive board, and I'm also active as an EAX member, so in the control systems work group. I talk to a lot of end users on different subjects, but a lot of them are related to how to implement open systems and what hurdles to take. So I think it's interesting to share that perspective with you, and it's not just a Shell perspective, but that's a perspective I get from many end users on how to move further with open systems and where to start. And that's really what I like to discuss with you in this section. But before I do that, I think it's important to share this with you one more time. I'm sure you've seen this quite a few times, but just for your information, I'd like to share the OPAF vision, the architecture vision we have for an open standards-based and interoperable secure system. And as you can see on the architecture slide, there's yellow and blue elements. The yellow elements basically are the new elements, the elements which will evolve out of the open process automation standard. And the blue elements are existing elements we already know today, like DCSs, PLCs, machinery systems, etc. In the end, we will have a parallel. So with this traditional automation system you see in front of you, we will draw the parallel, the functional parallel between what we have today, what we understand, what we all see, all the pictures we know, and draw the parallel to the open systems. And to do that, I'd like to make a few explanations about how this system will actually work, where the functions of that system will sit, and what that actually means. So to start, I like to start off with the field device side and the field side, so level 1 of our current systems. As you can see, that now is represented on the right side with the DCS and the I/O, and on the left side there is the distributed control node, or the DCN. As you can understand, the DCN is everything we can do with level 1 today. So it will contain I/O as well as some sort of compute power to run programs, our base layers control, if you will. But it can do more than just that. You can see that there is a DCN with no lines on the south side, on the bottom side, which means that it's just an edge type of device containing an app, which would mean that there is some smart application running in the lowest bottom side of your system, if you will. And then there's this application, which you see there. Applications run in multiple places in our current systems. But in OPAF, that application can sit almost anywhere. So it's all about where this application sits, where it's best suited, if you will, which is true for OPAF. And that's not always the case for our current systems. So if you have new applications you want to run, it's often difficult to move them. To input them, to put them in your system and put them at work. Then this is the ACP, or Advanced Computing Platform. Can be compared to level 2, level 3 type applications and the compute devices on which these applications sit. It's a virtualized platform, so that means that it will use servers, but it will have a lot of applications running on virtual machines in this platform. And to connect, the information coming from the DCNs and used by the applications, we need something to connect both all the devices, a spine or a backbone, if you will, and that is actually represented by what we call the OCF. I'm sorry. So that's the OPAF connectivity framework, and again, that's the network in between all the applications that transports the information from one application to another, or shares between applications, etc. Now I can hear you think, where should I start? Are there any products on the market, etc., etc.? You know, those questions are questions I get quite a lot as well. And if you want to get started, then there are, you know, multiple ways of getting started, and I'll try to touch on a few of those. One is, for instance, the greenfield example I'll share here, and I'll also touch on the brownfield example going forward. Now, getting back to that one question on certified products, are there? Can we already build an OPAF system? So the real answer is there's no certified components yet. But for those who followed our efforts, they know that that we are working on certification very extensively, and it's closing in. We're getting there, and I think the first suppliers have come to market with a platform as well that is OPAF ready, if you will. And so what, if that's available, what do you do? What do you want to, you know, explore, and where do you start? Well, the easiest way to start is obviously with a sort of a greenfield pilot or a test bed, if you will. And that could be done by, you know, connecting field devices, a few field devices to DCNs. DCNs being smart I/O or formal DCNs with you know, built-in I/O that are connected to the OCF, and on top of that OCS, they have an ACP where you can run higher level type of applications, and you can put an HMI, connect an HMI to that, and visualize the process you're working on. That could be one way, and that can be done today, as is shown by a few end users which have shared that with us as well. I think you already saw presentations here in the ARC on the ExxonMobil testbed. I know ExxonMobil has gone a long way in, you know, pathfinding and defining how this can work for them. BASF showed their demonstrator at the Namur Hauptsitzung last year. Or actually it was a little bit before that, November 2019 at the Hauptsitzung from Namur. I think that all shows that there is already things in motion, and I know a lot of other end users are building their own test beds or, you know, trying this technology on pilot sites. I think this is a way you can get started. You can start small, expand from this, and then move further. Another way of getting started, as I already mentioned, is more, I would say, the brownfields approach. In this brownfield approach, we need to connect the existing infrastructure, the infrastructure we have, our current system, to the OPAF system. That would require a device, a DCN, which is called Gateway. As you see here, this is how we see the connection between an existing system and the new OPAF environment, if you will. This will allow you to, to experiment and to find your way through the OPAS and what OPAS will bring you by connecting old to new. And it will allow you to do things like this, like connecting a DCN and have real-time communication between the new DCN and your existing system. And if you expand that, you will gradually move functionality from your existing system to your new OPAF environment. And in the end, this can be a very appealing scenario for many of you to first to learn and expand, and then gradually move over to this new reality we're working on. The same actually applies to modular systems. So we all buy systems that are built by external suppliers who supply technology more than systems, if you will. So the system is often an add-on to the technology package that those suppliers actually provide us with. And if that would, I'm sorry, if that would be a nice way to connect to, if we would have a handshake, if you will, how to connect to our existing systems, that would make our lives much easier. And what you see here is this modular process system, and obviously our existing DCS and PLC systems in the network structure we simplified. And if you would be able to do this, for instance, it would allow you to connect to this modular system and talk to that system real time and get the information from that system, send backwards and forwards, and it would actually integrate in your existing infrastructure. And that will be another great example how OPAF could help you actually in the next few years. With that, I like to take you through the summary of the section I presented. So basically, I think we covered the scope of and showed the parallels between our existing systems and the new open OPAS certified products-based systems. I think that was probably an eye-opener for some of you to understand which elements actually are represented in our current systems. I also think I showed you end users and explained about end users that are starting to work with systems, and they want to understand and validate capabilities and understand the benefits. I mean, we have a huge installed base. We probably will have new facilities as end users, and we want to understand those benefits for both the existing as well as for the new facilities we will build in the near future. And that's really important. So I think we covered that. On top of that, we also showed that you can start small. So building a small system, building a system that is modular and can be expanded, or actually connect a modular system based on OPAS to your existing infrastructure. Those are things we see as as they will pick up very soon. And what we've also shown is that, or what we mentioned is that end users also used prototypes and pilots already in their plans. Now, from my perspective, what do you do if you want to start? I would say go to your current supplier, ask them about these first DCNs. When can you start using them, or getting your arms around it? Because I think that's really important to get the understanding on what this technology will bring. It will be eye-opening, and it will be a game-changing thing for us to happen. So with that, I'd like to pass the presentation to Stephen Smith, who will take you through the next section. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jacques. Hello, I'm Bruce Ainsworth, Vice President of Automation Innovation for Georgia-Pacific. I'm a chemical engineer with 15 years of plant operations experience. Today I'm going to tell you how OPAS can benefit the operation of your facilities. But first I want to talk a little bit about GP, Georgia-Pacific, and why we're in OPAS. Georgia-Pacific is a large integrated pulp and paper company. We have three main businesses: consumer products, which is paper goods, things like paper towels, tissue, plates, and cups; building products, which are things like lumber and plywood and wallboard; and packaging and cellulose, which is cardboard, anything that's built out of cardboard. And cellulose is the fluffy stuff that's in diapers or in other absorbing products. We got involved with OPAS a couple years ago for three main reasons: to learn and contribute to the standard and participate in the standard building process. We saw an opportunity to apply this technology throughout our business and build long-lasting relationship with the founding members, not only the other end users, but the vendors as well. What does OPAS mean to GP? It means cost savings. We have over 150 sites, all have a different control system, either through different vintages, different models, different makers, and then they're all customized. Having a standard will reduce costs in a variety of ways. Another thing that means for us is access to data. OPAS offers seamless data into the cloud and our data lake. And finally, it will bring new ideas for transformation. Working with new partners and new vendors will open up new potential uses of our technology and our business. What you see on the screen is a schematic of the demo board we're currently building to demo and test version 2 of OPAS. You can't read them, but there's a variety of vendors involved, and we're working with several of the partners to ensure the success of this demo board. So how can OPAS help your operations group? There's a workforce demographic shift going on over the next 5 years. Thousands of control engineers, control technicians, and operators will be exiting the workforce, taking with them thousands of years of experience, knowledge, and manpower that will not be replaceable. So it is critical that we develop a streamlined control system so that industry can stay sustainable through the future. OPAS offers streamlining our control systems. It helps remove obsolescence and will provide more options for replacement and spare parts. OPAS will also open up opportunities to apply advanced control monitoring and diagnostics. It will also safely open up the possibilities of remote and autonomous operations. Thank you for your time, and please be safe. Now, Steve Smith from Eastman will explain why they are involved in the Open Group.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm Steve Smith, a project manager at Eastman. I'm currently focused on automation capital projects. My entire 29-year tenure with Eastman has been focused in some manner on automation and control system implementation and support. And as a global specialty materials company with over 50 manufacturing sites around the world, Eastman has over 350 control system installations comprised of numerous brands and vintages containing over 500,000 I/O points. At just our Kingsport site, which also serves as our corporate headquarters, we have 60 DCS systems from 6 different suppliers. And these 60 systems alone are comprised of over 20 different generations or vintages of these suppliers' offerings, ranging in age from newly installed to over 25 to 30 years old. And in the PLC arena, again, just at our Kingsport site, we have over 800 PLCs from 16 different suppliers, consisting of over 40 different generations or vintages, ranging in age from newly installed to over 30 to 35 years old, especially in terms of installed technology. So clearly, based on this landscape and footprint, lifecycle support of these systems is a major endeavor. Spare and replacement parts are becoming a significant challenge. Therefore, going forward, we're looking for greater interchangeability, interoperability, and portability of system components and applications. System reliability, both now and in the future, is of great concern due to age and obsolescence. Through recent experiences of entire system replacements, it's clear that this is not a viable strategy for us, given the significant cost and the labor and time required by such an approach. And therefore, we're looking for alternatives to help address this ever-increasing problem for us. So let's assume it's the year 2030, and we've begun installing OPAF certified components as opportunities arise. And in this example, we have a traditional DCS system that's been partially expanded or replaced over time with OPAF certified components showed on the left of this slide. Let's also assume that supplier X of the shown DCNs has announced the decision to discontinue support of this product within 5 years. While such a decision would traditionally result in consideration of a lifetime buy of spare parts for this component, or maybe even plans to replace the entire system, in this case, another OPAF certified DCN from any other supplier will serve as a compatible replacement. Therefore, over time, as need dictates, these DCNs from supplier X can be replaced with DCNs by supplier Y or any other supplier offering OPAF certified DCNs, thus avoiding system obsolescence risks while maintaining system reliability. So in summary, from an end user's perspective, open interfaces, portability, interoperability, and interchangeability of the OPAF standard enable unprecedented exchange and replacement of applications and components. These attributes help ensure that system maintenance has limited impact on process availability. An open market will reduce risks and dependencies associated with single supply sources. Technology and functionality refresh and introduction can occur without major capital investments and efforts. So we, as end users, are extremely excited about the OPAF standard, what it offers and enables, and truly believe it to be revolutionary in the automation arena. Harry, I'll turn it back over to you now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Harry Forbes. Thank you to our speakers. And now our speakers are being joined by a panel of end users and experts in the open process automation area. So let me just introduce the folks who have just joined us. First is Don Bartusiak. Don is now with Collaborative Systems Integration. He is the former chief engineer for ExxonMobil Downstream and Chemical and was really present at the genesis of the ideas for open process automation within ExxonMobil. Julie Smith has joined us. Julie is the lead for DuPont's Center of Excellence for process control and a voice of the end user par excellence. Luis Duran is from ABB and is very active in open process automation. Vien Nguyen is from Yokogawa and also a major activist in open process automation. Ed Agis from Intel is working in open process automation, and Intel is very involved in this, and Ed's specialty is the certification process. So with that, let me advise you, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You are welcome to add more questions. We've had several questions come in during the presentation, and we'll address those right now, but please feel free to continue to put questions into the Q&A box at the bottom. So let's begin with a question I think that was answered, that came in before it was answered, and that was exactly how does the public obtain the preliminary 2.1 standard? Dave, you answered that, I believe, but is that the case? You can anyone can get this document?
Yes, it's not actually released yet. You'll probably see a press release go out in the next couple of weeks or so, announcing it. Different parts will roll out at different times, and each will be announced, and they'll be available on the Open Group website, opengroup.org, and the link was in the presentation.
So anybody can get it for free?
Yes.
Okay. Another question that came in, and I think this related to your presentation, Dave, is would a compliant control system have to implement function blocks or other control system models possible?
Other control system models are possible and encouraged. What I think OPAF is providing is really a lot of choice in how systems are configured and what tool sets are used for the automation engineer. So we can add more parts to this beyond 1131 and function blocks and 61499. All we need is some participation, good ideas for people to standardize it.
Okay. So, but I mean, is it possible to use those other services? I think this is kind of the question. Maybe if I'm developing an application that has control functionality, I could just develop an application. I wouldn't have to implement control and function blocks.
That's correct.
Okay. So question, this one came in from Eric Lau, and I don't really know who should address this question exactly. And that is, in the OPAS architecture, what does physical IO mean, the IO electronics? So maybe someone could step up and just identify the concept of physical IO and how it's addressed in these documents, just from a 50,000 foot level, perhaps. I don't know who's best to do that, so.
Yeah, let me have a first go at it, Harry, and then maybe Vien can pick up. So, you still have to connect to your sensors and your final control elements, right? So the interface to the OPAS system is at that point. So what we call the field-facing side of the distributed control node maps to today's IO modules. So that's still part of the OPAS scope, but the quality attributes of interoperability, portability, interchangeability apply to that interface as well. So in summary, and this is addressed in part 7 of the OPAS standard, is where that the connection between IO and the first level of compute happens. Again, but applying, there's going to be standard interfaces, and the quality attributes of interoperability, portability, and interchangeability will apply to that interface between the IO device and the compute device. And Vien, do you want to elaborate at all?
Very good answer, Don. I think in OPAS we talked about, Don called it the field side. We also call it the south side of our devices. And when the device signals come into OPAS, we like to think of it being translated into an OPAS signal. And when it's been translated to an OPAS signal, it's communicate on the OCF. So that's what we'll differentiate between the field side versus the OCF side of OPAS.
Okay, there's a related question, I think, that came in from Bill Leiden, asking, are you standardizing specific industrial IO network interfaces and industrial control network interfaces? So that's probably a good legacy question, because everyone has hard and/or field bus foundation and/or Profibus PA and/or Modbus and/or everything else, any number of such interfaces. So how do these interfaces manage in a OPAS compliant system?
Maybe I could just jump in here.
Sure, Dave.
There's many different field technologies and networks and standards, and all of them can be used with OPAF in an OPAS system. We are not trying to play favorites with one over the other. We often use 4 to 20 milliamp signals as the least common denominator, but there's many, as Vin and Don said, whether they come in through digital, analog, or even through an Ethernet connection, they all can enter OPAS, all be treated equally.
Okay. Let's see. I would like to ask this question that came in anonymously. In the case of a brownfield project, the gateway must be OPC-UA compliant. Is that correct? As the top side of the gateway is connected to UA Connect connectivity framework. Okay, so I guess if I'm not trying to rephrase this question, it came in anonymously, but I take it that OPC UA is part and parcel of what an OPAF compliance system would have to have. Is that the question?
Yeah, I think Harry, any one of the panelists can answer that question. Julie, do you want to have a go at it?
Julie, you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, it's a 2020 answer, right? I'm on mute.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, yeah, there's going to have to be some legacy facing component of the gateway that, you know, to talk to, you know, vendor X, Y, or Z, whatever we have. And that has to be engineered. And, you know, we don't have the products yet that are available for every legacy system out there. We're hoping there will be a market for that, and end users like us will demand it, and somebody's going to make it. Whoever makes it, I will buy it. So that's really the message, you know, that we need to be telling our suppliers is, hey, you know, we want this technology, we need this technology to stay competitive. You know, please make products that we can buy.
Let me try to add to that, to Julie's answer, right? Because she's dealing with the kind of the legacy facing side of that gateway that Jack and Steven described. But then on the other side, that gateway is intended to be part of the, let's say, of the OPAS environment. So the profiles are defined in the OCF, the OPAS connectivity framework, and that includes obviously OPC UA. So the answer is yes, they have to be OPC UA as part of the solution.
Yeah, just want to add to that. We're also building the information model for OPC UA. So on top of just using OPC UA, there's a good set of information model that OPAS defined, and along with it, there's conformance profiles and facets that we created for those information model. So in addition to using OPC UA, we encourage vendors to be conformance to the facet and the profiles, and that will ensure interoperability between the vendors.
Yeah, thanks for that addition, Vin, because I think that's essential. And you know, just building on what Julie said, we're ready to, you know, we're open for that link, you know, that missing link, I would call it, because to be honest, in our current environment, we cannot add a lot of technology, and you know, building and adding technology to our current install base is really hard. Not we crack quite a few times, and I think that's really where OPAF can actually open up and help even, you know, the suppliers of today to, you know, to migrate to something that has more capabilities, you know, step away from the legacy, because I know legacy can be sort of that ball on your leg as well. You know, I come from Europe, a lot of medieval people here, but it's that ball on your leg that you drag with you. This is the new world, and come on, welcome, step in. You know, we want you, and we need you.
There's a related question coming in here from Mark Hosky of Control Engineering, and I think it kind of puts the end users on the spot a little bit, but the suppliers might want to address it too. And the question is, for so many end users nursing along an outdated DCS, what do you recommend? Migrate now or try to hold on for how long for an OPAS system? Well, that's a really good question. I know there's certainly systems of all types of ages in the installed base.
Right.
So without putting you end users on the spot, I'd kind of like to hear kind of what your strategy is for this. I know, you know, we're not, as Jaco mentioned, the first wave of compliant products is not in the pipeline yet. So what are your strategies with regard to this? especially for the older systems in your installed base. So I'll ask the end users if they want to chime in on that, some of their.
Yeah, I can start us off. I mean, we've already begun many migrations. We don't have the luxury of waiting, especially if you're seeing failures, especially if, there might be legal contractual obligations in some case. You had to get started. Just the sheer volume. Also, we can't sit back and wait. That's why this idea of having a gateway is really important, because we don't want to think, hey, plan A, B, C, sorry, you missed the boat because you went too early. That's not going to be acceptable. We need to have a way to allow everybody to take advantage of open systems at some point, whatever that point might be in their journey.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say that we're not waiting either. I mean, because of our landscape right now, unfortunately, we're not migrating quickly enough. We feel like, to address our obsolescence situation. And so we are not choosing to wait, but that's one of the reasons that we're participating in OPAF, is to try to do our part to accelerate the availability of these solutions, so that as soon as possible, this will be a viable alternative for us when we are presented with migration projects and opportunities.
Yeah, we're going on a case-by-case basis. Some of our systems, we're buying used parts off eBay, and you just can't, that's not sustainable. And then others are just a year or two with still available parts. So we're trying to delay those migrations as far as possible. But when you can't get parts, you got to keep moving forward to stay running.
Don, I don't know if you have a comment on that. You're not specifically an end user at this point in time, but you certainly have a lot of scars.
Yeah, so, ExxonMobil's been pretty, I can't speak for ExxonMobil anymore, but, you heard Dave DeBarry's talk, and ExxonMobil's been very forthcoming about this. So, ExxonMobil wants to move to OPAS-based systems, and just, how fast is, yeah, it's a great question. But, and Jaco really started this theme from the OPAF business working group of industry adoption. And I can speak on behalf of my new company. And I think that, we're ready to help end users get started. And I think that's the part of the business ecosystem you're going to see emerging. That forward-looking companies who are going to assist end users getting started. I think that's where we are in the technology uptake curve, Harry.
Yeah, maybe just a last point on that one. All the upgrades we do, and if I look at our install base, it's pretty up to date. So traditionally, we've kept up with a lot of the systems we have, but all of the upgrades we do are always economical decisions. We're companies, so whether you do something or whether you extend the life of a system, as Bruce said, that's economic decisions. And as we were in this era we're in this time, we're not seeing the systems as added value. We're seeing them as cost elements today. So the scrutiny on any investment on the system is going to be there with any company, and I think that's a factor we have to live with. So yes, at some point you cannot extend life any longer. You have to go to eBay. On the other hand, so this way out, if we all wait, and which we do as a community of end users, we wait with a lot of these upgrades till the very last moment. And then all of a sudden, this bow wave, this tsunami of upgrades comes with the same suppliers, and they're really not able to provide us with the resources we need to do all these upgrades. So this gateway is a perfect way out to allow for building on the existing and gradually move over that technology that's really out of date, that needs to be taken care of. And it's that sort of thinking that really helps end users as well as suppliers. This is not against the suppliers. This is really something we have to do together in our brownfield space, not valid for greenfield, because we want this technology. As I said, technology, building technology, adding technology on our current install base is a very hard nut. And we want to add this new technology. We want to add small AI type of algorithms. We want to add on an edge type of device. Try to do that on your current existing system. Get a sandbox there that allows that. It's not possible. So that's really where we see the future and where we think we should be going.
Let me return that question to you, Jaco, because question came in asking what Shell is doing to develop a test bed, and I maybe just rather than make it that specific, it would appear that ExxonMobil has made some serious investment and progress in terms of going through and developing not just the proof of concept, but doing it on a pilot, their pilot facility, the pilot program, and now with their test bed, which is about a year old. If one doesn't see corresponding programs going on in Shell, is there a reason for that? And what do you think it is?
Let me answer that. It's a very interesting question and a challenging one for me, but I'll try to answer it.
You want to be challenged, you're on.
No, it's not challenging, but it's about disclosing. But no, I think as I explained in the previous question, we are relatively up to date. So the water is not up to our lips to decide what kind of technology we have to we want to apply and adopt in the future. So although we were quite early on with OPAF, we approached it from a little bit different direction as ExxonMobil. And to be honest, we thank ExxonMobil for spearheading this and moving this forward, because really valuable. I think without that start, it would never happened. But we looked at it more from a data-centric and technology-centric approach. So what kind of technology do we need? Where do we have to focus? And yes, time is there. We need to step up to start embracing the physical technology and understand it. Where do we need to learn? Where do we need to grow? What kind of people do we need to hire in the near future if we're going to embrace these systems? And because they do require different skill sets. So you can expect us to step up in that space, and we should. That's about all I can say about that. But we've approached it a wee bit different, and I think in the end it will all end in the same point. That's what I can say about that.
Okay. I appreciate that answer. I would say, just from my experience in talking with and visiting various end users and so on, I would say if you feel that your installed base of automation is fairly up to date, you're in the minority. A lot of.
Or you spend too much money, Harry. It's all a matter of how you look at it. No, I don't think so. In our case, it was the right decision to take. But that's, you're right. But again, time goes on. So at some point you hit that obsolescence barrier somewhere. Okay. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No problem. I just feel that that's not the most common situation. Most of the time when I don't know if Bruce or Steve feel this way, but a lot of times end users feel like it is, as you say, it's not up to our lips yet. They feel like it is. And so they're having trouble keeping up with the pace of replacement that is required. Okay, let's see.
Harry, can I maybe, if I may,
Sure.
come back to Mark Hosky's question about what does the system-facing side of that gateway have to do? And I want to bring Ed Aegis into the conversation because this is one area where the conformance certification activity is already addressing directly. So if I may re-ask that question to bring Ed into the discussion, Harry.
Sure, that's fine. I'm happy to have that address that. Go ahead.
Ed, you want to talk about, because that's going to be part 4 conformance, and that just gives you a chance to talk a little bit about where we are in the certification activity.
Right. So as Dave touched on earlier when he was the first presenter giving an update, there's quite a bit of activity going on within the certification working group. And we have we've actually started what we call the validation and the verification stage of the test cases that we're going to be using for certification testing in part 4, part 5, and even part 2 as was discussed earlier in regards to security. So first and foremost, there are vendors that are building product out there. We are under confidentiality with them as we're getting them engaged to assist us with the validation of the test cases, as well as the test tools, because in some instances, like with respect to part 5, we've got to actually develop a test tool that we will be using to test and certifying the requirements that are called out in the OPAF spec for redfish. In part 4, we have a test tool that we'll be using and collaborating with OPC and adding additional test cases for that. And then in part 2, related to security, we also have been working with a third party that already has the test cases and test scripts, and we will be in the process of reconfirming those requirements to ensure that we have support for security level 2 that Dave also touched on. The other effort that's going on with this now is we're now engaging with these different test beds or third-party labs that'll be working with us, because as was touched on earlier, this specification really is a standard of standards overall, and it pulls in different requirements from a conformance and compliance point of view. So just recently, this discussion about the gateways that has been discussed earlier on, even within the OPAF group, I would anticipate as we're reaching out and in the process of conducting a series of surveys, the first one just went out this week, that we're going to get some additional insight into products that we're going to see, as well as we are instituting what we would call interoperability events. Initially, because of the COVID-19, these will be virtual, but we'll know more in terms of what products we're going to see for the first wave of certification. And I know Dave touched on this, that we're going to be introducing additional capabilities and testing for functionality in future waves as the devices are available for us to validate and verify the test cases and the requirements that are called out in the spec.
Okay, Ed,
Covered a lot.
let me follow up on that a little bit. So you talked about tools, and obviously OPAS kind of needs to become a trusted brand if it's going to succeed. So as these tools develop and as the technologies develop for automated testing and so forth, how's that going to be managed? And what? And just a silly question: is it going to be? How can we be sure it's going to be economical for suppliers to certify their products? I don't know anything about certification. Trust me.
Right. So one of the things that first, let me talk about the testing aspect side of it. Is that one of the things that we're pushing for is to make sure the testing is automated as much as possible. Okay, because that will definitely speed up time. So just to give you an example, right now with the test tool that we are working with ERDI for the testing of the redfish requirements, all that testing can actually be done in a day. Where the effort comes in that takes more time is the review and the analysis of those test results. But the testing basically has been set up that over 90% of those test cases today are automated. There are some that require a manual setup. We won't be able to get around that. In OPC, it's all automated. Okay, in ESA with security, it's all automated. Okay, now the other thing that as we move ahead with forming, either having a liaison or some sort of a collaboration agreement with these other parties that are going to be providing testing support, is looking at the availability, and this will be based more on the demand that we see from the suppliers, is looking at having some sort of a global infrastructure for testing. So it could be possible that ERDI has an agreement with a lab in the US. So if you're in the US, you can go to that lab in the US to get tested. These efforts are also being put in place to ensure that we minimize the amount of cost that's involved, either engineering support or travel. And then the other thing that we're looking at is we're in the process today of putting together what we call our accreditation requirements for a lab that wants to work with OPAF. And there are different ways of addressing that cost, whether you, for example, reach out to a accrediting body like ILAC or NAVLAB to have the lab accredited, which is expensive, or whether you look at maybe having a third-party consultant to bring down the cost of the audit of the lab. So there are different venues and options that we're looking at in the certification working group that are being discussed right now in order to try and keep the cost down to get your product certified. And the other thing that we're certainly going to look at is, as we see updates to the different parts of the spec, I believe Dave touched on this when he gave you sort of like a hierarchy of the different sections of the spec, is if we can take this testing and continue with the existing infrastructure of labs that we're working with, as opposed to bringing on other new labs, that will also help us reduce the cost. So the CWG, or the Certification Work Group, is having also discussions with the business working group to get that feedback and input and guidance as we look at the requirements that are coming out of the different subcommittees within the technical working group, to look at minimizing the cost and making sure that it's a good experience, one for the supplier who has to get the product certified, and secondly for the end user, in terms of I trust that this product has been tested to a degree that it's good to use, it's interoperable, and as we look at the future requirements in terms of the portability and configurability. So it's going in stages, and we're sensitive to that because it's something that comes up with any particular certification schema in terms of how do you minimize the costs so it doesn't get out of hand.
Well, thank you, Ed. And I would just say one way you certainly minimize the cost, and this is something you all have done, is to utilize existing standards to the greatest extent possible, and that certainly.
Yeah, so we're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak. We're coming up with from scratch, building up a test tool, writing the test cases, new test cases, et cetera, that it takes to build up a test bed infrastructure.
Okay. Let me shift gears now. This is a question that came in regarding sensor IO, and the question is how many I think it's meant to say how many IO can be connected to a DCN, and in case of edge DCN, any guidance on app size or number. I suspect the latter is probably there's no guidance, but is there any requirement for scale in the DCN in any of these specifications, or is that left open to a supplier? Somebody want to take that?
And maybe I'll step in.
Okay.
The intention is to have it be market driven. We're not building in hard limits. We're not designing a system. We're not designing products. We're designing a standard that can be used many ways. We really hope that the market, both with the end user, system integrators, suppliers, will drive this to where it needs to be.
And if I might add, definitely different users will have different set of requirements and different interpretations what the appropriate quantity of IO per device will be to drive the given availability or maintainability of their applications, right? So the standard have to be flexible, but cannot prescribe a particular solution.
Okay. One thing that was mentioned, I'm going to digress here from the list that came in, because there was some mention of forthcoming in the 3.0 of a physical specification. Can somebody give us a rough, a 50,000 foot view again of what's going on there and what people should expect? I understand it's work in progress, but is there some direction there that seems to be related to that, to this question perhaps?
Yeah, Dave, why don't you cover it with the Part 7 work?
Part 7 is the physical platform part of the standard. And in 2.1, it will have, a few requirements, but there's a lot of work going on. And actually, there's some of the members, ExxonMobil is doing some side research that they'll bring in, and they've been briefing the forum on. So I think you'll see a big step up in version 3 on the physical platform side of it. I don't want to say what it is because the forum hasn't decided, but there's some very innovative things being looked at. So I think it's going to be quite exciting.
Yeah, maybe just to make it a little bit more real too, Harry. I mean, it's about the interfaces, right? So what part 7 is going to address what size, weight, power, connectors, mechanisms for communications, interfaces. Part 7 is not going to design products. Like Dave said, this will be market driven, but just like the USB, as an example, we have to specify a standard interface mechanism. That's what the focus is going to be. We want the suppliers to innovate, but at that interface where you have to plug something into the system, we've got to standardize that. That's what people should take away from this effort.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see if I pick the next one. There's an awful lot of questions here. One question is more for the end users in terms of how did your company justify your business case moving and participating in OPAF? And did you have to, what was your ROI?
Well, so far we haven't put a lot of money into this, so it's been pretty easy to enter. But this is a play on the future, and moving forward, you can't rely on proprietary systems to run your plants. As the speed of business increases and the uses of technology, proliferates throughout everything, we have to be open to other people outside of the traditional vendors to bring us the answers our customers need. That's kind of how we see it.
So Bruce, you didn't really apply a particular ROI to it or anything like that. You just said in the long term, we need a broader set of suppliers to be able to succeed in our.
Yeah, and applying ROI to transformation is really tough, especially when you're looking at things like such a dramatic change and disrupting the entire business. You'll never get that ROI right because as these guys have said, they don't even know what they're really building yet. We're just working on the idea. But if you look at this idea applied to other industries, if you think about like Python and some of these other open languages and what they've been able to bring the world, that's kind of what you have to use as a mental model when you think about controlling your assets. And so that's kind of the approach we've taken.
Okay. I have a question here that asks, Jaco, you mentioned some different skill sets, and I don't mean to address this to you, Jaco, in particular, but the question is, what are the types of skill sets that are going to be needed in these kind of systems? I assume there's going to be some familiarity with OPC UA, with 61.131 and 61.499 perhaps, but if you could characterize the skill set that someone is going to need.
Yeah, I think for most of the end users will probably be divvying up the skills they need to maintain and sustain the systems as well as the applications in the same role. So you have system engineers looking after your system, you got application engineers building your applications, all that sort of stuff. But there's one thing that is, a sort of common denominator over all these roles is that we will use more IT type technology, and the IT type technology requires different tool sets. So if we have now vendor X, we send our system engineers to the trainings with vendor X, and guess what? At some point, they may even know more about that system than vendor X, but because they have to, live with it every day, and they live through it. But the same, is already happening today with our current systems. If you virtualize your server platforms from a single server to a virtual server environment, then using the different VM virtual machine or virtual machines you can use, it already requires different skill sets from what it was. So it is already moving, but basically a lot of IT type tools, and building on what Bruce just said, the good thing of that is that they bring a lot of capabilities that are built into IT technology much more than what we were used to. So some things will be much easier if you think about how you manage your systems today. It's kind of awkward process if you look at it, using this ancient technology and guessing what's wrong with it. I mean, that's not really today's world. If you look at your computer, it tells you what's wrong, and I don't feel well, and this is not really well. Well, with this current DCS system, that's not the case. It will be, more user friendly on one end, but you will have to, adapt to your skill set towards that model. Any others,
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? And I could.
Yeah, I think you kind of just have to think about, you guys probably, some of you guys used the slide rule in college, and I used the graphing calculator in college, and my kids are using MATLAB, and, and different, softwares. And so we all have moved along the scale of technology just in taking thermodynamics or calculus, so that just continues applying to everything in life. If we thought the iPhone would do what it does today, 20 years ago, what, would you even believe it? So.
And I'd like to add one more wrinkle, which is, we're talking about an open ecosystem, right? Where we have multiple type of suppliers, software, hardware. We're talking about a multitude of system integrators. It's a different environment than the one that we're accustomed to for the last, I don't know, since I've been in this industry. But the whole thing is, in order to motivate that and to make that really work for everybody, we need to bring those new skills or distribute those skills across the board. Otherwise, I think that's not going to be successful as an initiative. So it's important to not only, to have the skill sets in the end users or the system integrators or the suppliers. We need to really develop those across the board.
Yeah, agree. And I just want to add to what Jaco said earlier about IT skill sets. Cybersecurity skill set is highly important. Even a little bit of software development and hardware development, of course. Networking is extremely important. So some of that skill set that you sort of have to bring it from the IT as an IT domain into your OT domain.
Okay. One question, I don't know if about security that came in earlier, and I just want to, again, maybe 100,000 foot answer to this, not a detailed answer, but if in terms of OPAF systems versus the existing installed base of DCS and or PLCs, what's the differentiator in terms of security? How is an OPAF system going to be different from the end user standpoint with respect to security. I don't know. Is there somebody that can address that on this panel, or?
I can make it very simple if you want. It depends a lot on the vintage of the control system or product that you're talking about. But the cybersecurity requirements that we have today didn't, were not visible to us, 35 years ago. So, and it has evolved over time. So the main difference is these OPAF certified components are intended to be designed with security, already in the mix. And there's a very clear set of requirements by a, well-established industry standard and a well-defined set of testing and verification and labs that perform those. So from the gate, so to speak, you already have the requirements, the drivers, and the way to ensure that those are put in. That was not the case, many years ago. So that to me is a very simple difference. But if you start to go deep into the soil, you're gonna find it, the kind of worms that you don't want to get into right now.
To add to Luis's comments, just for the audience, security is required with all of the certification, all the devices. It's called out in the spec, and we have that in place as a requirement. As David touched on, the baseline will be with a security level 2 that's called out and noted in the 62443 specification that we're using.
Okay, we have a lot of questions here. I'd love to keep this discussion going, but we're going to have to wrap up. So there are a couple things I want to do before we wrap up. Dave, I asked Dave Clayton, my colleague, if he can share his screen and display a slide that maybe yeah. Thank you, Dave. This is a slide from the open group with a request for user stories. And Don, if you could maybe very briefly comment on this.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on the theme that Dave Emerson said in his talk. We really want to get feedback from industry. And Dave talked explicitly about feedback on the standard. This is feed forward information. So even if you're not an OPA forum member company, you are welcome to input to the definition of what we're going to be working on in version 3 by submitting a user story as a narrative. Just tell us what you want your system to do for you. This is an automated form. If you just, that QR code will take you to a web page that will allow you to enter this information. This is a call to industry. Your input is welcome. Thanks, Harry, for giving us the chance to get this message out.
Okay, appreciate it. Now, let me say thank you to all of our presenters and panelists from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much. You have to take virtual rounds of applause. And let me point out to the folks who are with us in the audience, there are more sessions today for the ARC forum beginning at noon and at 3 p.m. And I suspect they're going to be quite excellent. I'm going to be attending them, so feel free to continue that. There's also a workshop sponsored by Microsoft this afternoon. And next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, we will have another set of sessions focusing on supply chain, logistics, energy, and cities. And if you're at this session, you are entitled to go to those sessions as well. So please look over the program and feel free. And another point that we talked about before is that there's an open process automation chat area in this forum, which you can participate in. And I believe that will be going through next week. So if you want to engage with people one-on-one, you can use that chat facility to engage them either publicly or privately. So please take advantage of that. With that, a few minutes late, we'll wrap this session up. Thank you to everyone who has participated. Thank you for everyone who has been with us in the audience. It's been enjoyable. I'm sorry we couldn't get to more of the questions. Enjoy the rest of the forum. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all.
Thank you, Harry.